Infinity Redux by midnightwolf2192, Chapter 10. This is probably our dumbest idea yet. Sally sent the message to MJ as she watched Peter swing down the street headed towards a bank robbery. She had been Peter's sidekick for about 2 hours, and Sally had come to fully appreciate what their friend did and why his team needed to trust him. Peter had attempted to explain his spidey sense to them, but none of the cluster had ever really understood it. Now seeing how he put it into action just made Sally more amazed that Peter had done this before alone. His spidey sense not only helped him if people were attacking, but also helped him identify the best places to anchor his webs. The streets to avoid pedestrian traffic, even down to avoiding a flock of birds flying at him. When Peter had been off school after the group had met with the Infinity Stones, MJ had pulled everyone into an empty classroom during lunch and started making some big calls. Flashback. MJ, what's going on? Betty asked as MJ checked the hallway outside the band room again. We need to talk about Peter, MJ replied, moving to join the circle that the others had formed. He's not looking out for himself, so we need to be better. MJ had detailed her plan for Peter, including Sally joining him on patrols and the boys creating him an AI. MJ, are we pushing too much? Cindy tried to ask, but MJ shook her head furiously. Before anything else could be said, a teacher stuck her head into the door and told them they needed to leave the room as she needed to set it up for her next class. As they walked out, Sally grabbed MJ by the arm. MJ, don't you think you're being a bit controlling? I mean, Peter's not only been doing this for a while, but he has done it all before. He knows a heck of a lot more than we do. Sally tried to reason, but MJ shook her head again. No, he needs this. We need this, MJ replied before walking off to her locker. End flashback. Sally had known MJ for a long time. Their mothers had been sorority sisters at college. Sally knew that MJ dealt with things that she couldn't understand by attempting to control every facet of the situation. After MJ's dad had left, MJ had become even more awkward and scared than before. That had begun to manifest itself in the aloof attitude that often pushed people away. MJ had found it hard to make friends since she was living in fear of them leaving her. That generally meant that she either left them first or forced them to leave her, thus proving her internal beliefs that people always leave. Her phone in her hand vibrated and Sally looked down at the message from MJ. He needs us to do this. Stay with him. Sally let out a soft growl before dialing MJ's number. What? MJ's voice was tense, but Sally had known her long enough not to be offended. MJ, I'm heading back, Sally said as she made her way across the rooftops towards the fire escape. Spidey has gone off to do his job and stop a bank robbery. He doesn't need to be concerned about protecting me as well. Have Merlin tell him what's going on. Sally, you need to stay with him on patrol. He needs that, MJ said, and Sally growled. No, MJ, you need that, Sally said firmly. She could hear MJ suck a breath in through her teeth, but Sally continued. You need to control every single facet of this because you hate the unknown and you are scared. We all need to come to the realization that we are better to support Spidey behind the scenes. He has powers and skills that we don't, and asking him to ignore those simply because of our wishes, we are hindering his ability to help. What the heck, Avril? MJ hissed, but Sally knew she needed to hear this. I get it. You're scared. We all are, Sally said as she climbed down the fire escape. This world of superheroes and vigilantes and Infinity Stones is so foreign to us. It has never been any of our first freshman plans. We are about to finish freshman year. Our biggest concerns should be finals. We need to trust our friend. He needs to know we trust him so that he will trust us. If you tighten the reins too much, he will come to resent us and shut us all out. MJ didn't reply, simply hung up the phone. Sally jumped off the fire escape and threw the mask into her backpack. She grabbed her Midtown sweatshirt out of her bag and threw it on to hide the bodysuit before walking down the street and hailing a cab. She gave Cindy's address to the driver and sat back against the seat. Peter would be fine. She needed to remember that. Upon arriving back at the web, Sally wasn't all that surprised to find that MJ had left. Ned relayed her message to Peter, and Ned commented that Peter seemed calmer upon finding out Sally would be returning. Active word to Spidey. Sally said as she pressed onto her comm. Just letting you know I've returned to the web. Copy activewear. And thanks for understanding. Peter sounded relieved. A quick look at the screen showed that he was at the bank robbery and had just finished webbing up the getaway driver. Sally sat beside Ned and Betty as they watched Peter infiltrate the bank. MJ's pretty pissed, Sally commented from her spot on the beanbags. Stormed out of here without a word, but from what you said, you're right. She just needs to cool down, Sally replied. Can't imagine she'll talk to us for the rest of the weekend, or even for the next few school days. She'll realise I'm right, though. What are you two working on? Chemistry study? Cindy said almost sheepishly. We haven't put in many study hours this week. Can I join? I need to work on balancing formulas, Sally said. She joined Abe and Cindy on the beanbags and dragged her backpack over to her. Abe pushed his textbook towards her and Sally nodded her thanks. When Peter returned to the web later that afternoon, he could only smile at his friends. All but MJ were lying on the floor in a circle. There were several textbooks being passed around as the group studied for finals. Even Ned had been coerced away from the computers, only returning if Peter called for him. Peter grabbed his spare clothes and deodorant and raced into the bathroom to change. Once he was changed and had freshened up, Peter returned to his friends and joined them in their study circle. Where's MJ? Peter asked Sally as he looked around the circle. She got mad at some of the things I said. She went home, Sally replied. It was succinct but not a lie. Peter looked concerned, but Sally continued. She'll be fine, Pete. She just needs to sort things out in her head. Give her a few days. Pete nodded reluctantly, but pulled his study notes out of his bag. He'd been advised by his teachers that he would be sitting some harder exams, so he wanted to be prepared. As the group studied, they could almost pretend they were regular teenagers with regular problems. Across New York, the Avengers were slowly gathering in their common room for the rest of the tower. They'd all crashed as soon as they had landed from Sokovia, and the first person to be seen emerging from their slumber was Nat. She was soon joined by Tony, who, after dropping himself down on the lounge beside her, dropped his head onto her shoulder. How are you doing, Natasha? Tony's voice was rough, still tinged with sleep. Nat smiled and rested her head on his. I'm all right, just, Nat said, trailing off. Thinking about Bruce? Tony filled in and Nat nodded. Tony leant up and kissed Natasha on the cheek. He'll be all right. He's got the big guy to take care of him. They'll come back when they're ready. Nat nodded and cuddled back into the couch. She then had a thought and looked back down at Tony. How do you think Spider-Man got to Sokovia? Nat asked, and Tony sighed. He had been pondering that idea as he fell asleep, and it was the first thought he had when he woke up. Got nothing for you, Nat, Tony said. He then turned to the wall in front of him. Fry, baby girl, show me what I've gathered so far on our friend. Tony had been gathering intel on Spider-Man since he had first appeared on the scene. After meeting the web-slinger, Tony had become fascinated with the science behind his work. The web formula alone was astounding. Tony hoped he could meet the man behind the mask so he could interrogate him extensively. He seems like a good candidate for the Avengers, Nat murmured. Level-headed, down-to-earth, seems intelligent. Plus he's got that support team of his. Before Tony could answer, the others started making their way to the common room. First was Thor, followed by Steve and Rhodey. Clint came next, and the twins brought up the rear. They all made themselves comfortable around the room, and Steve looked at the wall with a raised eyebrow. Just trying to understand our web-slinging friend, Tony explained. He waved his hand in the air, and Friday made the information disappear. Now, if I remember last night's conversation correctly, Capsicle requested shawarma. What is shawarma? Pietro asked, rolling the word around in his mouth. Tony turned to the teen with a smile. It's heaven, Tony said, and while the Avengers rolled their eyes, Wanda and Pietro looked at him in wonder. And it's a post-mission tradition. I'll order from our usual place. You don't have to worry about us, Wanda said softly, and both Clint and Tony looked at her in confusion. You have done so much for us, and we have no way of paying you back. Wanda, I'm not asking you to pay me back, Tony said softly. Wanda looked at him with tired yet hopeful eyes. I am asking you to live your lives. Be teenagers. Don't worry about paying me back for things or anything like that. Now, you guys have a chance to start over, and we are in the position to help you. Besides, I got a call from Laura this morning. The kids want you to come back to the farm. There's nowhere better to relax, Clint said, and the twins smiled. Tony, I am famished, Thor said pointingly after a moment of silence. Any tension vanished and the teams resumed their teasing, with Wanda and Pietro slowly joining in. Just as Sally had predicted, MJ gave them a wide berth at school. She ignored them in any shared classes and sat by herself at lunch. Peter could feel his guilt complex starting to rear its head, but Sally quickly put an end to that. Pete, don't feel guilty, Sally said firmly when Peter expressed his thoughts to his friends. MJ needs to realise you have been doing this far longer than any of us. You are the smartest person in the year, heck, in the whole school, and you have a good head on your shoulders. You know better than any of us how to be a hero. We need to apologise for you anyway, Cindy piped in, and Peter frowned. When you brought us in, we assumed you needed people to manage you. We kind of forgot that we were teenagers, and you were the one with the experience. You know what's best for yourself regarding Spidey stuff. It's going to be hard, dude, but you need to pull us up if we're pushing too far, Abe said. We want you safe because you're our friend, but sometimes we probably go too far. You're our leader. You have the knowledge and experience. Ned nodded along with their friends, and not for the first time, Peter thanked whatever deity was around that he had a best friend and his friends. It took 3 days for MJ approached the group. She walked up to them at lunch, looking scared and confused. Sorry, Parker, she said as she looked at the ground. When she looked up, Peter was looking at her with a kind smile. I'll try to rein in the control room. May faded into June, and soon finals were upon the cluster. After MJ had apologised, things were starting to get better in the group. MJ wasn't as controlling and gave Peter a freer rein, much like he was used to having. Summer! Abe cried happily as the cluster met up after they finished their final exams. Betty and Cindy rolled their eyes at their friend as the three boys high-fived. I just want to sleep for 3 days. I agree, MJ replied. The group said their goodbyes and parted, knowing they wouldn't see each other again until the second week of holidays. Peter boarded the subway and ignored the other passengers as he travelled up to Queens. When he arrived at the apartment, May met him at the door with a bunch of balloons and a hug. What's this for? Peter asked with a grin as May led him over to the lounge. Sitting on the coffee table was a chocolate cake from the local bakery with congratulations written in red icing. Pete, you finished freshman year! May cried excitedly. And you've been doing junior coursework the whole time. I am so proud of you. May grabbed Peter in another hug, and Peter hugged the woman back tightly. He heard May sniffling, and Peter pushed her back gently. I wish Ben was here. And your parents, May said as she wiped a stray tear away. They would be so dang proud of you. Peter pulled her back into a hug and felt her pressing kisses to his head. It was in that moment, Peter decided, May needed to know about Spider-Man. She deserved to know. He could remember how she responded last time, and after the initial shock had worn off, she was supportive of his work. I was going to cook, but I figured you had nothing to be punished for today, May said with a coy smile, and Peter rolled his eyes at her and nodded gratefully. Pizza, Thai, or something else? Want to try something new? After selecting Thai, Peter ducked down to his room to change and put his things away. He had made the decision he would be telling May about Spider-Man. She deserved to know, especially now Peter had become involved with the Avengers. When they arrived at the restaurant, the waiter directed them to their table. Peter rolled his eyes fondly as the waiter flirted hopelessly with May as he took their drinks order. You do know he's flirting, right? Peter teased as May looked over at the menu. May went bright red and leant over to smack Peter gently. What? It's true. Maybe we can get some free spring rolls out of this. As dinner passed, May and Peter joked and laughed. During a moment of silence, while they ate, May looked over at Peter with a raised eyebrow. Something's wrong, May commented, and Peter looked up sharply. You're hiding something from me. Is it a girl? Have you got a new girlfriend? Boyfriend? What? No! Peter blushed crimson and May giggled. He then took a deep breath. I do have something to tell you, but it can wait until the morning. I just want to enjoy tonight. Do you think I'm going to get mad? May asked softly, and Peter shrugged. I know you're going to get mad, Peter commented. If I tell you in the morning, I can give you alone time in the apartment to process everything. Pete, no matter what you have to tell me, just know I love you. I will always love you, May said, and Peter smiled at her. She grabbed his hand and kissed the back of it gently before leaning over and stealing some of his food. That's for scaring me. Tell me in the morning. Peter barely slept that night. In the past, May had been mad, but he had had Mr. Stark to back him up when she needed things explained. He didn't have his mentor this time around, and that scared him. He ducked down to the shops before she woke up and grabbed bacon, eggs, and fresh bread, so at the least he could make her breakfast before dropping the bombshell on her. She's going to be furious, Peter whispered softly, knowing the Stones were listening. She will be worried. That's what parents do, Mind commented comfortingly. If it helps, time has viewed many versions of this conversation. In each and every one, May has eventually come to accept that you are Spider-Man. Some scenarios take longer than others, but the outcome is the same. I won't tell her about you guys. She doesn't need to be panicking on top of everything else, Peter said firmly. The Stones and his death would be secrets he took to the grave. May would be worried about Spider-Man. She didn't need to worry about him dying in his previous life. That is understandable, Time replied. Just trust her. May is a smart, strong woman. She will support you, no matter what. You just need to let her process. Before Peter could reply, May walked into the room, wiping sleep from her eyes. Peter walked over and kissed her on the cheek before returning to his cooking. Okay, this is going to be a tough conversation then, May commented as Peter nodded. May poured herself a cup of coffee as Peter dished up the food. The two Parkers sat at the kitchen table, and Peter was slowly picking at his food. Breakfast was a silent affair. May seemingly realised that Peter needed time to psych himself up and gather his thoughts. When breakfast was done, May and Peter walked over to the lounge, and Peter took May's hand. I need you to tell me something. I need to tell you something, but I need you to trust me, Peter said after a moment of silence. May nodded at him, and Peter took a deep breath. You remember, at the start of freshman year, how I got really sick? May nodded, albeit with a confused eyebrow raise. Peter continued. Well, that was because something happened at Oscorp, Peter said. We were touring their genetics lab. One of their experiments got loose. It bit me, and I got sick. Oh my God, May gasped. If we'd known, they would have insisted we sue. Thank God they were shut down. Yeah, Peter replied, before taking a deep breath. Moment of truth. May, I was bitten by a genetically modified spider. He trailed off, letting the words sink in. He knew, the moment she was starting to realise the gravity of his words. Her eyes widened, and she began shaking her head. Yes, it's true, Peter said softly as May shook her head. I'm Spider-Man. What the flip, Peter? This time around, she didn't scream the words, just whispered them in horror. May was staring at her nephew, praying that he would tell her this was all a joke. Why? Ben, was all Peter said, and May gasped. The night Ben was shot, I should have stepped in. I had my powers then, but I was scared. Honey, Ben would never have let you. May was now back in comforting mode. She pulled Peter to her and hugged him tightly. Peter felt a few tears slip down his cheeks as he buried his face in May's shoulder. I started doing Spider-Man properly after that, Peter continued before May could speak. I found the guy who shot Ben. That's why I started doing it. But after that I couldn't stop. I enjoyed helping people, and well, I had powers. I couldn't not help. Peter. May trailed off. She didn't have words for what she was feeling. I'm sorry I lied to you, Peter said softly. I'm sorry I kept it from you. But I'm being safe. I'm careful. Ned and the others, May said, realization hitting. Peter nodded and smiled weakly. My team. MJ calls us the cluster, Peter said. They stay at Cindy's and help out. Abe helps with the suit. Sally makes sure I'm training and fit. Cindy helps out with any science or medical stuff. Ned is the tech guy and MJ makes sure we're all doing what we're supposed to do. I need time. I need to think, May said after a few minutes of silence. Peter nodded and leant over and kissed her cheek. I'll go out for a bit. Not as Spider-Man, he added when May looked at him in horror. I'll go out as Peter. Give you time to process. But May, you need to know, I can't give this up. I don't want to keep doing this behind your back, but I will keep doing it. Spider-Man is a huge part of me. I just can't give him up. Peter grabbed his phone, wallet, and keys, and after kissing May on the cheek one final time, he left the apartment. He found himself wandering Central Park and ended up doing a self-guided tour of the statues. Peter had just finished taking a few selfies with the Alice in Wonderland statue when he turned and promptly collided with another person. Normally his spidey sense would have warned him of that, but given how stressed he was about May and her response, he wasn't surprised he hadn't noticed. Oh my god, I'm so sorry, Peter said, not looking down up as he jumped to his feet and extended a hand to the other person. Little brother? The voice that spoke was accented and full of wonder. Peter's eyes shot up as he found him staring into Wanda's green, wide eyes. Peter? Is that you? Peter didn't say anything, just pulled the girl into a hug. He felt her hesitate for just a second before her arms wrapped tightly around his waist and squeezed. Wanda was murmuring softly in Sokovian into her hair, but Peter didn't even try to translate it. He was just happy that she was there. She was safe, and she was giving him a hug. It is you, Wanda said softly, reverently as she pulled back from the hug. She moved some of his hair from his face and cupped his cheeks. I cannot believe it. How are you? How's Pietro? Geez, I have so many questions, Peter said, and Wanda smiled fondly at him. Before she could answer, a silver blur appeared. Sister, I have something. Pietro trailed off as he looked at his sister. He looked at the boy's appearance in consideration and grinned widely. Letting out a yell of excitement, Pietro lifted the smaller teen up and spun him around, Peter's laughter soon competing with the sound. You are here! Just like you said! Wanda and Peter hugged everybody. The older teen was hugged by Peter, reaching out and pulling Wanda into the hug as well. He knew that back home May would be full of questions and concerns, but right now he was in the arms of the people he considered his older siblings, and that was all that mattered. End of chapter 10. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed this. This was a bit heavier than normal, but MJ needing to control things, that's very relatable. And May being horrified and shocked. I really wanted to give that woman a hug. But I love the note it ended on with Wanda and Pietro meeting up with their little brother. Absolutely gorgeous. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in chapter 11. Bye!